Wonderful. Thanks, Evelyn, and thank you, WBEC-East, for having me here today. Just a quick check. Can everybody see me, hear me okay before we proceed? Awesome. Great. Um, quick introduction about Ariana Digital and a little bit about myself before we jump into I won't say the presentation is going to be more a discussion and interactive session for today. I like the idea of workshops. So Ariana Digital is a PA-based, women-owned boutique consulting company. We have been in practice for over 10 years now, servicing large Fortune 500 clients. And our specialties are horizontal solutions, which means we look at all business processes and help deliver design, data, and emerging tech solutions to businesses. But we are also vertical partners with Microsoft, Salesforce, Adobe, and Snowflake. So that aside, we can move on to a quick introduction about myself, and then the rest is all about the talk today. I'm Yashkeen Desai, and I have 17 years of experience in digital transformation, which includes everything from having run 6 global data centers for a large company named GE, and to have run marketing and e-commerce programs, BI, as well as most recently, I am the founder and principal at Ariana Digital with an upcoming startup, the myndQ.ai. All right, so that's just a little bit about me, but this is not about us. This is about what we are about AI and digital media today. And I know that we have a big mix of participants on this call today. So what we wanted to do in interest of making this interactive and also personalized as we move through this series. So for those of you who have registered for this first one, but did not know that it's a 4-part series that will increment into additional detailed topics, it will be very helpful to provide any feedback or information or things that you're curious about today so we can align that into our forward-looking sessions as well. So let's start with the first poll. Here is where we try to understand our audiences today, just so we know who you are and what's your experience with AI. And along the way, we'll take more questions, but this will help us tailor some of the information we provide. So Evelyn, do you want to bring up the first poll just so we get some inputs here?
Yes, I've launched it and we're collecting some answers right now. I'll give it a couple more seconds.
Right. Yeah, I know people are at different levels of, how they have used AI and experiences. Now, one thing to mention, we are not professors in a classroom for AI, right? We are practitioners ourselves. We learn and we bring our experiences that we ourselves see in our business as well as with our clients. So if you guys have things that you have experienced or you have observed, please do put that into the chat. It'll be a great discussion topic either today or going forward.
Awesome. And yes, do you see these results as well? Perfect.
Yeah, I'm seeing, this is great. So daily use, 49%, yay. Okay, we do have some good stats there. So we only have 8% who are not using, and that's okay. This will probably help you set the ground. And for those who are using it, like I said, please feel free to share your experiences if it doesn't match with what we have said here. And so let's get right in. Perfect. So, no, just to level set, like we said, this is not a place where we are going to profess like, oh, this is AI. It's more about a practical application of AI in small business. So the first piece that we'll look at is obviously what is AI and what it's not. So that sets the ground for how technology-wise AI is working today and what it brings to the table. And then the rest of the discussion is going to be focused on 3 other key factors. One is risk versus return. So yes, AI can do all these amazing things, but what is it that you want to put your money towards, and what are the things that you want to keep in mind? So risk versus return is an important part, especially at the beginning of your AI journey. And then there are some helpful tips around like what are the entry points for small businesses and practical steps at that initial stage of your AI journey. So that is what we hope for you to take away from our discussion today. Now, what is AI? And this gives you a very non-technology view of AI, right? It is the intuition behind how things have progressed. And right underneath here, there is a small line stating the journey. And with this is literally a technical documentary of how AI has progressed, which I will touch upon right now. Just for a little bit, we can get into more technical depth over the next few sessions. So AI is not something that started today. The journey of AI started way back in around 1950 for the first time when Alan Turing came up with the Alan Turing test. And the idea was to say, if a human spoke to a computer and another human, will we be able to assess the difference? And if not, that conversation then becomes artificial intelligence. And over time, there has been evolution in this journey. It started with data science, and this was again in the early 1990s and 200, where predictive analytics and insights became a thing. And this was based on data science, but it was foundationally on an infrastructure. So remember, infrastructure makes the difference as we move along. And that's where you hear things like NVIDIA taking over the world. So let's understand how the journey has happened. So data science and statistics was always here. We knew we had the traveling salesman algorithm. We had all these algorithms to predict, probabilistic and deterministic. And those were used in your BI technologies, the business intelligence dashboards. But what changed with machine learning is the idea that machines could learn. So for the first time with machine learning, we started to build not deterministic rule-based algorithms, but just shoving in data into these machines. And we'll talk about what machines these were. And they would learn from those patterns. And then with those patterns, they could predict and take that input back in to make themselves better each time. And so that was machine learning at its inception. Now, what came out of that? Things like, fraud detection. So there are standard patterns. If something switches, financial, banks used to call you saying, hey, there's a potential fraud on your credit card. Was it you? So those things are based on the core machine learning. Then came the idea of infrastructural change, neural networks. So large neural networks were put in where they mimicked the human brain. There were layers in there, which we call nodes. They're like neurons. And when large, massive amounts started going in, now not only could they start learning patterns, they were predicting patterns, and they're doing it at scale. So there were perceptions that started coming in, and that gave rise to facial recognition. So it's something that went beyond just the data or the foundational pieces. So that is where machine learning came in. And from machine learning, we went on to expanding this idea of neural networks. And there was a big moment in the history, the transformational moment with ChatGPT, where transformer models were launched and became successful. And all of a sudden, AI came to the forefront. Now, what was different with these transformer models? They were still on neural networks. They were still using all the past information, but now they could create content. So initially, if you think about it, you send in 100 pictures of a cat, and then can the machine detect that it's a cat, yes or no? That was what it was. But then later on, 100 pictures of a cat and a prompt saying, give me a cat wearing a hat. And now the machine was able to create a cat wearing a hat. So that was the transformational big moment in AI. Now, the things that we want to keep in mind are creativity, learning, creativity, and autonomous actions, which are now coming through in the next generations of AI, are the transformational pieces which has taken computers much closer to what humans do. And that is why we need to focus on the elements that are shaping the results in these three areas of AI. So that was a little bit about AI and the technology behind it, not very business, but required. So you know what helps. So data is key, context is key. And these are going to be important points to remember as you move along and you start doing real practical day-to-day work, like putting in prompts. So how would I put a prompt? And why would I need to know this? Because you have to understand where we're coming from, so you can derive the best results when you put it into practice. So that was the reason we had this little bit of a technology deep dive on AI here. Now, we'll come back to any questions again, but I'm going to move on to the next slide. And what is not AI, right? So you know what is AI now and what it is not. Because it is still foundationally based on probabilistic designs, it is foundationally still based on the data training, that the data inputs that you put into training. There are a few things we always need to keep in mind. Every model is different. It's trained on different sets of data, and it excels in different aspects. Now, there are some large language models like ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini, which are trained on extensive data and are more generic in nature. But at the end of the day, they are not always accurate. They do hallucinate, and there are going to be checkpoints and guardrails that you will have to put in place. Context. So unless you give it the right context, remember we said context and data is important in that technical little speech that I gave. Context is super important because what it does in that world of AI, in the node, the context you put in helps you predict the next output. So it's not just the training data. In the point, in the moment, it sets a context space and then starts giving you answers. So putting in the right context in the moment is also as important, or maybe even more important, as we go along. And bias. Bias is something that is inherent. Like ChatGPT was trained on all of the internet data. And if there are biases in our society, they are going to show through. And we have seen that with Gemini. You put in a question like, oh, what are women professions? Or in ChatGPT, what are the professions of women? You might see that, oh, nursing or a teacher, and so much more lesser like an engineer or an astronaut. You'll see more of like men having those professions tagged with them, but that is all biased. Now there are companies that are looking at AI safety, and so it is going to get better, but it's never going to be gone. AI will reflect our society based on the training data. So now with that said, we are going to move on to some practical sharing here. And the way we have, shared our experience or our suggestions for your path forward in this AI adoption journey is to look at that risk and return equation. It's standard. It's been there forever. As a business, as a small business owner, you know that you want to look at your returns first. You want to look at your problem statements. And as a digital strategist, that's what we've been doing, even with like Fortune 500 clients that we work with. So our adoption journey starts with this risk and return equation. And what we have seen is putting your initial efforts towards time, and productivity within your consistent existing business processes, simple things. Maybe you're putting in a lot of time writing RFPs. I don't know. Maybe you're taking a lot of time, answering questions through RFQs, anything which is LLM or conversation oriented, language oriented in this generative space, or which is creative, forms a very good starting point. It helps you reduce the amount of time that you're spending on, so you can use it in other places within your business, or it helps improve quality, right? Consistency is confusing here, but consistency is more about in terms of delivering it in a particular way, not so much about the same word coming out of the LLM. And then as you go up the matrix here, you can look at internal processes. So you say, oh, I got that. I got all the primary stuff. I'm using ChatGPT. I'm using Claude. I'm prompting all of that stuff. The next level that you would look at is internal processes. Then start looking at your internal steps and see how you want to bring them together. Maybe you have a supply chain problem. Maybe you have like customer service answering problems. So start with that. Don't start with something that is external, because that is at the top of our high risk assessment here. Now, here are a few examples in terms of what I just said, the low risk and faster wins, right? So that's the first part. Social media drafts. We all, as business owners and entrepreneurs, know that reaching out to our markets in your social media drafts and content, the velocity of content that needs to be generated and forgotten is immense. This helps you creating a prompt template that helps you drive your social media drafting. Great starting point. Your emails and newsletters, great starting point. We can also recommend some tools in the market that we have ourselves tested. We use it, and pretty much every tool set. So if you've been using, say, MailChimp, or if you've been using like Outlook, even there are now plugins that allow you to automate those while still having a human touch point in you for reviews. So start with those. I did mention research and summaries, RFPs. For our own RFPs, we totally use context-driven chat recommendations. And it does help because RFPs are like large text of data. You get in requests, you want to summarize them to understand what exactly is your client looking for. Do the research. There's perplexity for research. Do your research and then pull it into your draft so you can move forward with a better output for your business impact, for your business results, right? So those are great starting examples that you still have total control, you still have the full guardrails in place, and yet you are doing a better job in terms of delivering quality for your entrepreneurship or your business out there. So let's move on to the second one, medium level, right? So now it starts getting a little bit difficult to keep control. And yet, if you focus on some of the internal workflows and put, I would say, milestones or guardrails in between to ensure that nothing goes out without a human in loop. So there's the concept of human in loop, right? So if you're doing SEO or web content, and I'll give you an example. One of our large top consulting firms, we were consulting along with them for SEO and their marketing campaigns. So we used Conductor AI and some Python scripts to revisit all of their pages and output what changes we wanted to do. We had governance people, coming in play and reviewing the results. And then there were people who went back and used AI to make those updates. That got reviewed and then pushed out. So you see how internal workflows can be optimized. Again, there are multiple tools that you can weave into this while still having human control as the stitch between, two things, two steps, two tools, two AIs, whatever you call it. So we're not autonomous yet. This is the middle ground. Obviously, the returns are much higher than just using an LLM to spit out like a new draft of something. Now, sales emails. Again, it depends on what CRM you're using or what productivity tool you're using, but Salesforce, HubSpot, and even Office, right? Copilot. We have a lot of ways within the Copilot Studio or Salesforce Builder to create these workflows automatically and pretty fast while still having review processes. So you get the point. One thing that I did not touch upon was visual content, right? So we spoke about a lot of LLM side of things. We also have generated models which are multimodal. So multimodal models essentially are the ones that can natively stitch text, images, videos, and even real-time speech into it. So try and experiment. These are low-hanging fruit. So your creatives, there is Adobe Express that we use, Adobe Firefly, which is part of the Adobe Creative Plan. And then there is CapCut, which our teams are using every day. there is caption.ai. Use these tools. And if nothing, there is Gemini, which has Nano Banana. It does a pretty decent job. Now, one thing I'll mention in here, I don't know if anybody noticed. I'm going to go back a couple slides. So this slide here, and again, obviously, this is not just preaching. We have used AI to build out these slides while still having a reviewer in place to make sure that this connects with our message and we stand by it. But this slide here was not something, it is precise. It is not having any typos, but it is built with AI. This was built with Gemini Nano Banana. However, if you go back and some more here, I want to show you precisely the difference. All right, so some of these slides here, like the practical next steps and some garbage, right? So there are pictures that might come out with garbage text, and there will be pictures that will come out with precise information. This is based on the model that you choose and the prompts that you put in. So this is why, that context of how AI works is important. So you have to be careful about using the right choice in models and the context you provide. All right, so where were we? Oh, now we are on to the hard part. So hard part sounds like it has been around forever. Chatbots. We have had chatbots. I mean, no one waited to have a chatbot, but did they work as seamlessly as they do now? No. Nobody wanted to use a chatbot like, in 2020 until LLMs came in and they got integrated. Even today, there's a lot of research going on in terms of what data we need to expose into chatbots and, what information or actions we can let chatbots do autonomously. So that is a complex space with a lot of research still going on. Marketing automation, always been there. Like 10 years ago, we rolled out an integration between Adobe and Salesforce for marketing automation and lead scoring, all of that stuff. But what is this marketing automation? This is about we not saying, oh, this is your audience, this is the campaign. We put in a goal and a bot creates the audience, creates the campaign, launches it based on signals coming in, and also creates the creative that will be displayed, the message that will be displayed. Now that is like the full automation potential that we have with AI. Similarly, on and on, personalization at scale, predictive insights. You go in, you no longer will need like you obviously will always have the visuals, right? So the old ways of BI. But you can just punch in, okay, what is, the stock potentially going to look like in 10 days? Should I invest? And that's what a lot of asset management companies are doing. So this is the hard part. I would not suggest anybody who has not started on the first two foundations to really jump directly into this. Most companies fail with AI because they don't know where to start. It's like the bad taste you have. I started in the wrong place. It didn't work for me. It didn't do nothing. And now I don't like AI. Or it just doesn't work. I think start small and then grow from there. And that's what we do. We help companies take that path forward. Now, we talked about the risk aspects, right? And what trajectory we want to take on. There are benefits. There are proven benefits out there that companies have seen, organizations have seen, and the benefits primarily, and there are more benefits, but this is just a narrow summary of what that benefit would look like. So marketing, we apply some of those techniques or use cases that we mentioned, time saved and engagement. It is a true thing. Beyond productivity, you do get benefits like conversion rates and efficiency and customer satisfaction. So it's not always about productivity. And even with productivity, we can talk about that a little bit later in risk. Productivity is at risk in your existing state. So with the evolution of technology, what we have observed, and I have personally observed as well, is that the job roles have to morph similarly, right? So if I was doing my drag and drop design for a campaign, Now, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to create prompts and templates, which are going to then drive that automated delivery. And I'm going to be the one who's going to test the results 10 times to make sure that this is producing exactly what I want it to. So that's the change in mindset that we need to bring in if we want to, pursue this path. Oh, here we are. We are, I think, almost midway. And before we move forward with the benefits, let's see what you guys think. So we have 2 questions coming up, right, Evelyn? So let's go with this ROI. Let's see, what do you think delivers the fastest ROI? Okay, if you're, sorry if I disturbed or interrupted your lunch. This will take just a minute for you to put in.
And yes, as people are responding, we did have 2 questions in the chat. Do you want me to ask them now?
Yeah, I could do that while everyone gets a little more time.
Perfect. So someone said, I haven't used AI. I want to use it for research and writing. I'm not sure which sites. Is it true that once you submit your writing to AI, it is no longer your intellectual property? Unfortunately, I get different responses, so I haven't explored AI too much yet.
So that is a very good question. Yes, in a way, that is true. And we will be touching upon the things you need to keep in mind when using AI. So with ChatGPT, and here are the nuances you want to keep in mind. With ChatGPT and also with Claude, I haven't checked Gemini recently, but when you do a chat, there is something called as a temporary chat, where your information disappears and is not used for training. So what you need to do is ensure that those settings are properly set, like don't save my chat. This is temporary. And in your profile, they will have questions around, can we use this data for training? And are you signing off on copyrights? So you really need to ensure that your settings, that you haven't opted into it unknowingly from a copyright standpoint. Now that is different though from when you actually do submit and you say, okay, let the AI take it. Is it being used for training? It probably is. It could be used for training, especially depending on the model. So I'll quickly touch upon this from a technology perspective. So there are 3 types of models today. One is your managed services model, directly from an OpenAI or directly from a Claude or directly from Gemini, right? These are API-based models. They most probably always take in data unless the settings are, precisely unchecked to run and test their models and train them. So yes, a lot of times that is what we have observed. And the companies may say whatever they have to say. But there are other models, like there are models that you can download. So open source models. ChatGPT has open source models. You can download those and host them in your own infrastructure. And that is what a lot of companies do. They download these models, they put it on their infrastructure, and they host those models. Now, obviously, there is more capital cost to it, there is more maintenance to it, and so large companies can afford that. And then, and also for research purposes, right? So if a JP Morgan is going to train on their data, or if an EY is going to train on their data from so many years, they are not going to put all of that into a ChatGPT as is. And these companies are using these models firsthand, having worked with them. So it depends on what the infrastructure is. And it would be advisable to ask, depending on how guarded your data is, whether it's IP or it's privacy concerns, you need to do your due diligence on the hosting aspects. Governments, public sector, when we do RFPs with the public sector, they are on Azure because an Azure government cloud. So these are pre-vetted infrastructure environments where these organizations are hosting their AI. And even so, like we said, they tread their way cautiously because it's a new technology and you want to get the benefits without getting burnt. So I hope I answered that question. And if you need more insights into like what exactly, we can always have that chat later, where to find those settings and stuff.
Perfect. And then one more question before I share these results. Could you cover exactly what is our AI stack? Is that just what AI tools you're using, or is there more to creating your business stack?
So say that one more time. I'm like,
Yeah,
Ariana,
I think they're curious on what the AI stack is. Are those tools specific to you and whoever's creating their AI stack, or?
So every business has a AI stack, and that's where their goals and their data policies and their governance policies play in. Now, I'm talking about the large Fortune 500 businesses, but I also touch upon what we do as a very small business trying to do so much, right? So let's say we are talking about a large Fortune 500 company. They will have their own ecosystem. They will have their own infrastructure. Let's say they're an Azure shop, or they're a Google shop, or they're working with large platforms like Salesforce. They go through sourcing and they ensure that that infrastructure is set up. And then more often than not, the tools that they choose integrate into these ecosystems. So it's not a very siloed kind of place. Now, taking that same philosophy down to like small businesses, what I believe and what I've seen the most benefit for our own purposes is to evaluate the market and look at the space. Start with the space that you want to work in. Even if it is starting with like 2 base models, choose ChatGPT, Claude, try to understand how you want to use it. There are a lot of features and functionalities within that. Create your templates and then grow onto them. A lot of integrations coming into these foundational models as well in terms of like Outlook. Can I integrate my Outlook? Yes, you could. If you have Office, start with Office Copilot and look at those tiny integrations. So I don't say that there is a standard AI stack, but it is based on which use case you want to start with and what are you foundationally invested in right now. Because if you are in Office, if you're working in Teams, I'm not going to say now start using Google, the Google Cloud for your files. That does not make any sense. Also, I'm not going to say start using like 15 different tools, because every place you're going to buy credits and you're going to have to maintain so many tools. Like, oh, I can have Notion.ai, I can have Otter.ai, I can have this. Start with somewhere where you find that ROI. That's why we spoke about it. Where is your biggest ROI? Have a standard tool set starting with LLMs and then grow from there. That would be my suggestion. Unless somebody else has experienced something else, please put it in chat, because this is a space where I would love an open discussion.
Perfect. Thank you, Yesh. And I just shared the results from this second poll.
Okay, let's see. All right. Yep. Okay, here. Content and communication. So 58% are with me on this. Lovely. And we have one more question before we get into a little bit of talk again. So risk. What is the one risk that you have to, that rises right at the top that you always have to keep in mind? More questions coming in? Okay, what do we think there? Absolutely, 84%. So we all are vibing, as they say with vibe coding, we are all vibing here. We aligned on our risk factors to keep in mind, and that is definitely something that you can't lose sight of. Fantastic. So are we ready to move on? Any more questions? How are we feeling so far? Okay. All right. So with that, let's just summarize what we have, and there will be a little bit of prompt related slides coming up that we'll talk about. So here, what is it that we don't want to start with? Let's just summarize autonomous decisions, sensitive data. we just touched upon that with the question. And so what I was saying here is protect your PII, right? Even when you go, if you start doing, that mid-level where your workflows are going to be put together, every piece is still an AI agent. Ensure that when you upload your data into a prompt, that the PII is redacted upfront. So this is a very good example of what you do not want to feed into an LLM or any open source, any model, unless you have it housed inside of your own, realm of your technology stack. So do not do that. It's very important that PII does not get out. Make sure the settings are checked. And here is the thing, we're not running after replacing human relationships. That would be a big debacle in terms of AI rollout. We have never got to think about, I want to have, like this person replaced or that person replaced, let's start with the right mindset. We want to build on revenue, or we want to build on quality. And from there, if you trace it back, you will find that there are things where the human relationship evolves rather than it gets disrupted or replaced. So will there be, things will shake up a little, but they will morph rather than getting replaced. That's a goal to keep in mind when you start using AI from an adoption standpoint. And so what I say, and this is something that I have, I was inspired by a couple of books I read by Kobe and Kimin. If it affects trust, money, or people, it's our responsibility to go slower and also not be reckless. But at the same time, there are huge benefits. So you don't want to be fearful of using new technology for your benefits either. Now, in small business today, I know at the beginning, I heard like over 50% are using AI every single day. And here are some statistics that we have pulled. At least one power tool is helping US businesses with efficiency and productivity. There are, there are runways for like 6 to 12 months to get into that mid to autonomous space in a lot of cases. And time savings. People have seen benefits in terms of, how they can reroute their time for strategic growth. So if you have not started on your AI journey, this might be a good time to start, dipping your feet and see how that works for you, because it's going to be a competitive advantage, right? And we all want to do what's best for our business and for our people. So taking that forward, I think we touched upon this. Marketing, customers, and operations are the first few things that you link out to. And how do you do that? You do that with create prompts. And here are some example marketing prompts. So we started at that social, remember we said, let's start our journey with something that is easy peasy, that is your low-hanging fruit. And so it all boils down to first mastering prompt and prompt engineering. That is the foundation. We don't have to know how to build workflow engines. We don't need to know at this point in time how to build autonomous solutions. We need to start with prompt engineering and understanding how to write prompts. Now, if you think about it, prompting, we used to say, oh, we need to be great at communication, business communication. This is the new addition to that. Prompting is the way you talk to your AI agents, you talk to your AI solutions. And there are a few critical things you want to keep in mind beyond the fact that you do not want to provide any confidential information, and you want to check on, how the information is going to be used. In the moment, though, you have to be very precise and goal-oriented in terms of your prompt writing. And there are many strategies for better prompt writing. A lot of them are focused on context windows, system prompts, and what you input into them. So here we have three options. The first one is obviously, us going and chatting like, hey, give me 3 social media posts. But where is the context? Like the prompt doesn't know. And remember, it creates that space in which it's going to create a response. It's too big. It's too vague. And then I don't like the answer. AI does nothing for me. You can refine it. You can give it some more specifications, Instagram post or a bakery in New York. Now the AI, based on all of that information, narrows down that response space to contextual information from New York or to contextual information about how emails work, how Instagram posts are shaped, and then outputs the results. So it's a lot better. But you could do a lot better even beyond that. So when you craft out your prompts, what you need to keep in mind is that it has to be, what are you trying to do? Who is the audience? What is the goal that you're trying to achieve? If you're going after a channel or multi-channel, specify what you want to do and the tone in which. So setting a role for that, the AI. So it starts understanding, I want to behave as a marketing assistant, and then giving specifications is essentially like finding an intern, and it's the first day of this intern, and you want to give them instructions of what they need to do. So think about it that way. And then examples. Now, here is where you can build in additional context. Now, if you're writing an RFP, one little prompt is not going to help you solve what you're looking for. So in that case, you're going to be required to put in the incoming information. So, it is a proposal request is coming, an RFQ document comes in. You might have some legal standards in your business. So you have all these documents. You want to insert those in there from a context standpoint. And then you want to craft it in a way where you're giving examples of how you like your output to be, because then it brings in your personality, it brings in your brand, it brings in a logical line of thinking that the LLM is then able to use. So a few things so 0 shot was what I just showed you, no example. Few shot, 1 shot is exactly what it says. You give certain examples of what the output should look like. If you have a format or a template from before, throw that in. Throw that template saying, this is a template and I need you to write my output in this template. So then you don't have to go back and recreate it. We did the same thing for this slide deck, right? This is AI generated, but it was reviewed. There were prompts. We said, okay, this is the brand standard. This is my brand color. These are the brand colors you can use, primary, secondary, create this. And then you take it, and you can always use. So one other thing in prompting is you don't have to stick to like one tool. Once you have established your 2, 4, 5 tools that you want to use, be it, let's say, a Gemini or a LLM like ChatGPT to start, a Canva for your creatives, or an Adobe Express for your creatives. Now you can use these tools between each other. I get a prompt, I get a textual input, I get slide definitions of how I want to create something, or a word definition of how I want to create something. Take it and put it as an input into your creative tool and say, now create me a final product or a draft for my final product. And then you have your slides ready. It took you 15 minutes. And then what you really need to do is take the time to sit and review it before you send it out or make edits and changes, which is the human in loop part. Concerns. I think we're at the end of this, intro presentation, almost towards the end of it, but I don't want to leave without pointing out explicitly the concerns that we see: wrong information, data privacy, brand voice. So you don't want to make things robotic. We didn't talk, it doesn't feel like a lot, but it does take away from your engagement if you're in marketing. So always remember, little things do matter. If you don't find your brand in your delivery, then you're losing your customer base. So brand voice, just as important beyond what we said at that high level. And where to start. Quality assurance, human in loop. So these are we know in our heads that these are the things that we want to keep in mind, but what the slide does here is to explicitly put those in front of you as you start building your prompt templates, your prompt workflows, and putting out these use cases in practice. How do you do that? These are the guardrails: fact checking, review your content, and be transparent. So being transparent is very important. You don't want to not mention the use of an AI bot because that just does not help with the delivery or the trust factor. Remember, trust, people, money. So trust is tied into having that transparency and thereby support from both your team as well as your customers. And I will leave you with 4 things to try if you haven't done so before. Go out there, start with, like I said, a foundational LLM model and try out, a few things. Here are some prompts for you to go take a look at. Be it an email, be it a media post, your FAQs if you want to put that, or a simple automation if you're already, past those 3 things. All right. So we have about 10 minutes left on this call. And so what I would like to really do is get a feel of, what this team, having heard what you heard today, having done what you've done, interactions with AI up until now, it would be great to just, in the chat, get questions, thoughts, concerns, also pointers to what you still have curiosities about for the next 4 sessions. Even if it's technical, that's totally fine. So yeah, the chat is open, and please try to drop in your questions or thoughts right now.
And yes, we can kick off with a question that's been in the chat. So someone said, I've started to see more generated by AI disclaimers. When is the disclaimer appropriate in marketing materials?
So in marketing materials, either it has to be vocalized if you're in a presentation like this, or you would want to put just like we have a confidentiality label, right? So categories, when you categorize your documents, one of the things that we have introduced is an additional category saying AI generated or AI assisted. And I think that really helps set the ground on transparency and trust that we just mentioned. And we have been doing this, right? A lot of companies have been doing that. We have been saying confidential documents separate from public open documents. And just to add to that, so try to extrapolate your existing processes to think differently is one of the ideas or mindsets that we want to put in place here.
Okay, and someone else asked, what is the best AI platform to train for SEO or AI referrals?
So SEO, I have worked personally with Conductor AI. It's a fantastic platform. They do have a good runway in terms of tying the intentions that come out. And SEO is now also GEO, right? So we also want the generative aspects in your search. So that is one of the platforms that I've worked with. Obviously, there are many in that competitive space. There's SEMrush, which is now taking on new AI modules. But in my experience, Conductor AI has been is quite forward in terms of its AI-based recommendation journey or roadmap. So that's one I can recommend, having used it personally.
And then we had another question come in. Who are the chat AI questions shared with?
Today's.
Sorry?
Is this about today's AI questions?
I think they meant in general, but I could be mistaken.
Yeah, so they don't go to a person. So if you're going to a ChatGPT or a Claude and you ask these, or Perplexity or any of these models, and if you haven't turned off like the training part, they don't typically go to a person they go into a training process. There are reinforcement learning teams though that actually have humans look at inputs and then qualify that as a yes. So you might have seen there's a thumbs up and a thumbs down, even in regular chat responses. That is called as reinforcement learning. they try to take it directly at source, but so Scale.ai got bought for billions by Meta. Why? They have these teams which are really good at training that has automated components, which is the unsupervised learning, but there's also a human component. Now, it will not have any PII. They lose context to the idea of who provided this information, but they still can see it and rank it to a prompt. So there are some smaller teams that help with reinforcement learning. I think that would be a human touch that would be seeing that data, but otherwise it's unsupervised. The bot takes in information, puts it out. There are bots that test against each other. So it's more like neural networks pitted against each other outside of that.
Nice. And then we had someone share that they would like to learn more on how to improve prompts, comparison of different AI platforms, which are better for what type of users, the advantage of paid versus free AI, how to better utilize it to increase work productivity. So just a couple of things to keep in mind. I did drop a link in the chat. We are hosting, this is the first of a 4-part series. So if you haven't registered yet for the second workshop, I'll drop it again in the chat, but it'll be happening next Wednesday at the same time. So hopefully you all can join us for that. Someone asked, in one of your sessions, will you review settings specifically for different platforms?
Yeah. So I feel like, I don't know, Evelyn, I don't want to put you on a spot, but we did have the session, the third part, which was essentially focused on all these real practical things, not just what is AI and what should we focus on, not the business, high level aspects. So the intention in that one was going to be to take a few top tools and talk about what they do good and what they could do better and allow for some selection in this space. Yes, that one. Yeah, 4 tools, platforms, and tools. So that will be one that, I would invite anyone who's interested in that level of understanding around prompting techniques, what is Claude better at, like, in terms of professional outputs, context windows, like Gemini has like a million context window versus, it's like 250K for ChatGPT and how they lose. So things like those, which are more technical and less functional or business oriented, will be covered in session 3.
Yes, and I just dropped that link in the chat. I see folks are registering for these upcoming ones. And that'll be held on the 18th, so February 18th from 12 to noon. All right. So we had someone else drop something in the chat. It's a scenario question. So you just received an RFP from a potential client. How would you suggest someone start preparing a proposal using AI? Where would you start bringing it into the process?
Yeah, we do this. So I can totally answer, some of the practices that we have set. No, I'm open to sharing. So first you want to start with identifying, and for that, I would suggest using Claude, and we'll talk about why and how that later, right? So Claude it has long context windows, and it is actually catered for professional discussions or professional conversations and output. So you would start with creating a project, and in the project, you would put in all the incoming documents that you get from your client or, potential client, your internal documents that you do want to put out there, right? That you want to tie into it. So now that brings in the request and a potential input towards your response. Then you create a system prompt, which sets the ground for what you're trying to do in that project. And then you start a chat with them using prompting techniques, asking for pieces. And I wouldn't say, oh, go make me a response. Please don't do that. At this point in time, you will get an answer, which is great, but it won't be exactly what you need. So maybe you start with sections from your RFP, which is already tied in there, and then create prompts for each section, which helps the LLM pull in the section you want to answer. Let's say it is an intro, and then point to the information in your database or in your document saying, this is information about Ariana Digital. Now create me an intro paragraph, right? So you have this, you do it for the first time, you can use it over and over because now you have a template. And many RFPs require like half the things which are a repeat. with minor changes, which you can then reprompt and put in. So that is a general way of how we deal with our fees. And we have seen both quality as well as productivity gains in doing that. Any more questions? I think we are like right at the top of the hour now.
Yeah, no more questions coming in as of now. All right. So folks are saying thank you in the chat. Yes, thank you, Yesh, for today's presentation. This was a wonderful introductory kickoff webinar to the rest of our series. And thank you all for joining us today. So please keep an eye out for reminders when it comes to next week's session. If you haven't registered, please register for the rest of them. We'll be sending them out in our newsletter. And I will be sending a follow-up email today with today's presentation materials as well. So again, Yash, thank you so much. And thanks everyone for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for your time and attention. Always send in any questions or inputs even after if you have any. I'd be happy to answer or push them into our series as we move along. And thank you, Evelyn.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. I'll see you all hopefully next week.
Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.